I think it's my time. And you know, the thing is here, actually, we have so many people coming in here, but I like to perform for a very small, exclusive crowd. That's my thing, always. Hi, my name is Jan Lundin. I'm the CEO of Funka. Funka, for those who don't know Funka, is one of the thought leaders when it comes to web accessibility. It's a company been around for 22 years. Was actually founded by the disability movement. And those of my age remember that when everything is going to go digital, you know, around the millennium, everything is going to go digital. And at that time, obviously, there was a group of people saying, okay, the train is leaving, what about me? There's no ramps to the internet. And actually, at that time, we thought it would take like 2 or 3 years, there would be laws and legislation actually dictating conditions that everybody could be possible to be on the internet. It took over 20 years, but we're there now. Also founded a company called Accessibility Cloud, which is an automated testing tools for accessibility. My background though is in the travel industry, so I'm really happy to be back here. I used to live in Spain for 5 years. But not doing this, I'd rather be sailing or skiing. But I have to do this to be able to do the other stuff. Okay, so we got about half an hour where I'm going to kind of give you a dive into the word of inclusiveness and accessibility and give you an understanding of the necessity of working with accessibility. But also, as stated in the invitation, is that just around the corner, we have a new EU directive coming out that will affect basically all of us as consumers, but basically anyone who has anything to do online will be affected by this. So hopefully, when you leave, you will have a little bit of understanding what that would imply, depending on what you're doing here today. So that's my objective for the day. And this is the big question. You know, why are EU passing laws to force organizations to have accessible websites? Just a quick poll of hands. How many know there's a new directive coming up in 2025? One. Really good. All right. And that is really significant because this has just gone under the radar, and I think it has a lot to do with the pandemic. But the one thing the pandemic has shown us is that working digitally doesn't necessarily work well. You know, we're having our kids that are going to school on remote. They are using tools that are not accessible. We are trying to have our videos and meetings on remote. Doesn't necessarily work. And there's a lot of interactions that is now moved from a physical space into a digital space. And they don't work for everyone. So just dive in and look at the kind of the backstory. Why is this happening? You know, what is the background to all of this? And you might wonder, you know, why should we now focus on accessibility? Well, the obvious answer is that we are in 2025 soon. And the other one is that, well, everything is going to go digital. All the tools, all the interaction with society is going to be digital. But if you look at just some of the statistics when it comes to accessibility and it comes to digital accessibility, we need to look at how we are capable as humans to interact and if there is any diversities in terms of capabilities. And if you look at how many actually has something which hinders them to interact, to have a disability, well, if you look at any of the countries, about 15 to 20% has some kind of disability, which is physical. But this is not taking into place disabilities which can be temporary, or disabilities we don't count when it comes to cognitive, or when it comes to me being a male. You know that about 9% of all the male population actually have color blindness. That is not accounted here. This is just a physical, statistically, disability is one way or another. And that counts to about 1 billion people that is affected. If things doesn't work online, we actually affecting and have a negative impact about 1 billion people, if you look at it. Another thing which is also pushing this is actually we are becoming older. The population is growing older. And this also has an impact. We all have had parents that now during the pandemic that they are forced to go online to book their COVID shots. It didn't work. You're forced to go online to do all your banking because they're closing down all of the physical offices. So that is also has an impact in terms of how you can interact on digital media, that our population is growing older, elderly. And already by 2030, about 1 in 6 in the world will be aged 60 years and over. So the whole demographic is changing in this same rapid pace as everything is going digital. And we all know most of the digital interfaces are being developed by kids who's between 20 and 30, and they work perfectly. So this is not taking into account building digital interfaces. But those things are changing now. So 3 of many reasons why this is happening in the EU is that one, obviously disability is a global public health issue. And for me, I think also accessibility is about, it's a democratic issue, meaning that everyone should have the right to have access to public information, to have access to public welfare, regardless if it's being delivered physically or digitally. So it is a human right issue. But I think that we do think that passing these laws, that the EU doing it for the right reasons, but actually one of the main reasons that the new directives are being passed, both to the public sector and to the private sector, is the third one, aging workforce. Because the EU workforce are coming elderly. If we're going to still be able to work after we're 60 or 70s, we need to have digital interfaces that works for us. And this is the main driver for EU passing this directive. So it is actually about survival from a EU perspective, if we're going to continue to be as productive as we've been before. But before we jump in to look at some of what the directive is, who's going to be affected by it, I think we should just stop and talk about inclusion, usability, and accessibility. But all three fits together and works together. And inclusion is about diversity. Inclusion is about everyone should be included in everything we do. To be able to be an open society, open in terms of the different services that we have. Usability is about developing services which has a easy understanding user interface, to do that from the beginning. And accessibility obviously is the ability for everyone, regardless if they have a disability or not, to be able to interact with those user faces. So they're very tied in together. And one of the design philosophies that I came out when working in terms of people with disabilities it's a design philosophy called Design for All. And Design for All is actually something which is a philosophy which is, if you design something for a person with the least capability, it actually becomes better for everyone. And with that philosophy, and you all are affected by this, and I'm sure you used, even today, a product which was designed with this philosophy. And single-handed mixer is actually a handicap tool. But it's a much better solution than having a faucet with hot and cold knobs on. And that is actually was developed for handicapped and was developed for hospitals. But that is now the common solution in any, if you take a shower, you go anywhere, this is a much better solution than the old one. But it was not taking our needs into fact, it's actually taking the one with the least capabilities needs into fact. And there's many of these types of that we think take for granted is actually designed for somebody with the least capability. And there are some other examples as well. One of the regulations is when it comes to videos, for example, is that videos need to have captions. Obviously, those are those with some kind of impairment, but caption is great. If you're looking at video, just sitting in here with all this background noise, and you can't look at it, at least if there's captions, you can still understand the content of it. If you're weak in that language, it supports to have captions on the videos. And there's many other things. Where I have my office in Stockholm, I'm sitting by the central station, and there's this one great invention that I think saves lives every day by the hundreds, because just outside my window, we have the main street going down, and we have the traffic lights, and always at the traffic lights, there's a queue of people waiting to cross. And I tell you, 80% of the people are looking down into the smartphones doing something. They don't look at if it's green and light. You know what they do? They listen to the sound. Then they go. When the sound changes for the green light, it's not made for them, but they use it. It makes it much better. So it's just things, that we take for granted, which is not developed for us, but it's actually helping us in our everyday. And this is something that we need to keep in mind when we look at it. So when we look at the new directive, when we look at talking about accessibility, anything, is actually there's something really good coming out of this as well. And when it comes to accessibility, it's all about the abilities that we have. It's about our vision, it's about our hearing, it's about our speech, it's about our motoric skills, it's about the cognition or concentration and reading. You can have one of these impairments, or you can have several of these impairments, but it all affects in the way we interact with the digital world. And you might also think that this is something which is only meant for a minority, but it's not. Because the one minority that we all will be in is in this, at one point in our life, or in one situation in our life. Because when we look at disability, most people think a disability is always a permanent disability. But it can also be a temporary disability. That you have, you had an accident, you broke your arm, or you could be, temporary, having a depression which has a big effect on your cognitive ability to take on digital information. So all of these things, you are walking in and out in this minority. Or it's situational dependent. A very good example of that is that if you develop something on the screen and if it's very bad contrast, you're standing outside with a very bright light. If it's a bad contrast, it's impossible for you to actually fill in the form. So again, it's not made for that. It's actually made for those who has a visual impairment, but it helps you to making interfaces much more usable. And there's many, many examples of this. So therefore, I think this is something that a lot of people think about. I don't have to get involved in this. This is something that it really is. We are trying to solve a problem for a minority, but actually you're trying to make the life better for everyone. And we have made studies that shown that if you make a website, build an accessible website, and you have, for example, forms. We work a lot with authorities and municipalities. And we can actually show an accessible website for a municipality where they fill in, I'm going to have childcare, or I'm going to apply for this to school, or whatever, compared to a form on a website which is not accessible. That actually decreases the number of phone calls into the central switchboard, because people don't understand how to fill in the form compared to another one. So it's actually a cost-saving activity as well. Okay. So digital accessibility is about everyone's, regardless of ability, being able to participate in the digital society on equal terms. That is what digital accessibility is about. So what is the state of the nation? As I stated before, if almost everyone will experience some form of disability, temporary, permanent, at some point of their lives, if that's the case, the question is, so will we be able to use the internet as it was designed? If the internet and all the solutions were designed by somebody who's between 20 and 30, perfectly capable, creating something in the front end that looks perfect, but will it work? Is it actually accessible? And one way that we measure accessibility on a website is that you all have smartphones, and you have Siri if you have an Apple, is that in most of these type of tools, there is an assistive technology that actually can help you navigate on the internet. That assistive technology do not read the screen. That assistive technology read the code behind the screen. And you can make the screen look perfect with an imperfect code, which means that Siri will not understand what's on the screen, because therefore you need to follow a certain standard. When we look, and this research has been done when it comes to accessible websites, I'm sad to say that inaccessibility is the norm, not the exception. And the latest research that was done about 1 million websites was only barely 97% that was accessible. And you might think, well, that's a global survey, it doesn't apply here in Spain or in the UK. We did the same survey with all the public offices in Sweden. They were merely better. I think there was 93%, 7% were accessible. So the norm is inaccessibility. And this is why the market is failing. This is why legislation is coming into place to actually force us to build tools and websites that are accessible. Because if they are not, we will not be able to work as we are in the future when everything is going digital. So that's the full reason why there's been passing 2 laws. There's been 2 directives passed. The first one within the EU was passed already 2020, in force 2020 for the public sector. The next one we're going to explore a bit further is the one that's going to affect some of you as corporations, but all of us as consumers will be in effect in 2025. And that is called the Web Accessibility Directive, which is for the public sector, and the European Accessibility Act, which is for all sectors, regardless if you're publicly governed or not. So just to give you a bit of understanding the difference between the 2 directives, is that the digital accessibility in the EU is all governed by the UN Charter of Rights of Disabilities, which is something which all of the member nations have ratified, and everything kind of comes from here. In EU also there's a disability strategy. This is something within EU which is called one of those flagship strategies, where they put out a strategy how they will work with disabilities for the next coming years. Next 10 years usually is the time they have for this. Out of this, we have the procurement directive. The procurement directive has an effect on this. It's connected to the coming effective of the Web Accessibility Directive, which basically means that if I'm a public office and I'm doing procurement, I cannot buy anything which is not following directive, not being accessible. So it has a big impact on corporations and organizations doing business with the public offices. Because if you're not accessible, they are not eligible to buy from you. And then obviously the European Accessibility Act coming now in 2025. And here's a bit of the boring stuff, but I think it's really important to understand. When it comes to an EU directive is something which transposes into national legislation. What that means is that with an EU directive, there's a minimum requirement. This is the minimum level that we will have. As a nation, an EU member, you can add to that requirement. So therefore, there will always be a variation between different member nations how they apply this directive. When it comes to an EU regulation, which is something different, the GDPR, as you all know, that's an EU regulation. That is applicable as it is to all member nations equally. So that's the difference between being a directive and a regulation. And what we're talking about here is a directive, it minimum. This is the minimum requirements, but the member nation may have other further requirements. Another difference is that, which is important to understand, okay, what does this imply for us as an organization is that if you have a EU directive, they also point at an EN standard. An EN standard, that's where you find all the details of what is required. And the neat thing about this, which we should be proud of, because this is a really neat way to actually pass laws, is that there is a law pointing at the directive. The directive the EN standards may change because the technology changes. Something happens and they need to update the standard. That doesn't mean they need to pass a new law, which is very cumbersome, take a very long time. So it's a very dynamic law, which also requires that you as an organization or working with this, you need to keep yourself up to date, looking at that EN standard, which is applicable. So the Web Accessibility Directive in the public sector, who is covered? It's the public sector and other bodies governed by public law. It indirectly affected, as I said before, suppliers to the public sector. And what is covered? There is websites, it's the intranet, it's the extranet, documents, apps. So anything which has a digital interface basically in the public sector is under this law. When it comes to European Accessibility Act, it's slightly different. It's something which the decision was taken already in June this year. They will be enforceable in June 2025. So we have about 2.5 years, no, that's about 2 years still, 3 years to get our stuff together. There will be some exceptions until 2027. And who is covered? This is the interesting part. It's covered manufacturers, authorized representatives, importers, distributors, providers of certain products and services, meaning basically everyone in the value chain is affected by this. So the scope of the products is that computer and operating systems, smartphones, self-service terminals, you being in the travel industry, hotel industries, checking desks, checking points, all those things, vending machines, everything in this. Digital TV streaming services, e-books, e-readers. Emergency service doesn't apply for here. Transportation, not the transportation itself, but the digital services. The tickets, the checking machines again at the airport, all of this. The booking interface, e-commerce. And this is the interesting part. You might think this is Amazon, but e-commerce is here defined as a widely spread. It basically says that if you have any type of e-commerce activity, even if you have a physical store, but you happen to sell something online, just on the side, you are covered under the same directive. So that is basically any company that I know that has a consumer interface is affected by this. This is huge. Consumer banking service, they are pulling their hair at the moment to getting all this legislative systems to be up to par. But there is an exception. So if you're a small company, a micro company, and according to this you have less than 2 million in turnover, you're less than 20 people, you can just continue as before. There are other reasons why you should be accessible, but not for this reason. You actually do much better business if you have accessible website. So there are specific grace periods for this that you can look at, but I will just run through this. So apparently everything is not going to be perfect in 2025. There will be some grace period for phasing out machines. There will be some grace period for contracts and so forth. But believe me, this is happening. So you better be planning for it already now. There's also some interesting when it comes to the content and the app content is that anything before that's on the website, 2025, you don't need to do anything about. And any documents published, you don't need to make them accessible. Online maps is also one of those things that is not accessible. However, in the future, if you need to provide an alternative way to show the way if it's not on the map, that's required. Third-party content you can't control. You have a Vimeo player on your website. You cannot take responsibility if Vimeo is accessible or not. Any archived material, you're not to care about. But everything from that date onwards need to be compliant. That's really important. So it's good to start training on that now. So the question is, how do I comply? Well, if you read the directive, it says, well, your service needs to be maximized to their foreseeable use. What does that mean? How do you tell a developer, this is what I need to have? And this is the tricky part, and this is not something we will solve here, but at least if this is applicable to you, you will know where to go to find it. Because to find accessibility requirements of European Accessibility Act, you have the general requirements, which is an EN standard. And then for certain products, they will have their own standard. For certain services, they will have their own standard. And then there will also be sector-specific standards. So I would imagine, for example, when it comes to meetings or physical things, most likely there will be a certain standard that they will agree upon. So basically, you need to go to 3 different places to look at this. I don't think you need to bother by this, but the big organizations need to do that. So maybe it's not the most cleverest way, but this is the way it will work. The standards that this also points at that you need to take into consideration will be the product and services standards. There will be the design for all standards. And if you have a physical location, there's also be another standard with built-in environment. This will point at. Okay, so what happens? Well, if you don't follow the law, well, they will work with CE marking in this area. There will be a declaration of conformity. They are following this. There will be monitoring agencies, and most likely sector-specific agencies. They will monitor that you are compliant. They will work with open legal complaints. So as it works in the public sector, it's like a whistleblower thing, that on the website, you need to be able to have a way where me as a consumer can actually complain if it doesn't work. That also needs to be in place. And there will be penalties. And there will also be actually an occasion where the EU can decide to shut down a web page if it's not accessible. But obviously, this will not happen overnight. And the penalty levels is not set. This is being set on the national level, and that is being decided in the next couple of years. Is it going to be as expensive as GDPR? We don't know. But it will happen. There's actually concrete tools for this to make this happen. So my advice to you is that don't hold your breath. The current status, the current EN standard actually points the direction. So if this is something which is affecting you, there is already pointing out the direction, what you need to be compliant with. And this is not something you do overnight. This is a process. This is something which requires planning. It requires priorities. We work and do audits on websites to see if they're compliant or not. If there's a website that have taken no attention to accessibility, it's a nightmare. Obviously, it's a list which is longer than this. Where do we start? You just need to start somewhere. That's the whole point. You need to build into your internal processes so you actually deliver services which are compliant and fully accessible. And the thing is with accessibility, it's not like GDPR. You fix it once, then it's fixed. It's something, as many times you update your website, those as many times you need to pay attention to if there's anything which has an impact in terms of accessibility. So it's a constant. It's something which you have to work with basically every day. Therefore, build internal competences, get some ambassadors, some people that are experts and are enthusiastic and learn more about this. And ask help when needed. I mean, we love to have clients, but you should try to solve this yourself, and we would love to help out. But I think it's something, it's 3 years away, so, you have plenty of time to solve this. So, how does this feel? Not too good. Or we're perfect. It's funny because usually when I meet somebody, you know, who's not within the accessible industry, this is like a complete shock. All of this. Well, the neat thing is that, you know, we're actually making our everyday life better for everyone, which I think, you know, the great thing to working about this. So I think there's like 1 minute for questions if there's anything. But I think I gave you so much facts, so you're drowned in facts, so there shouldn't be any questions. But at least if you walk away from here and you remember there's something that's going to happen, if you remember that if I make something, if I make a solution, if I build a website, if I do something which is working for the ones with the least capability, it will get better for everyone. Those are the two key takeaways you need to have. All right, that's 30 minutes right there. Thank you.